Ladies and gentlemen, I just want to add this quickly in here before we get into the rest of the video. You might be like, wait, what's going on right now? You'll get a secondary intro in a few seconds, but please listen to me really quickly right here, guys. In this video, I go over a recent post that was made on Reddit about what the real reason could be for, like, you know, the texture remaking, remodeling, and that stuff, and we'll get to that later, guys. But something that's going to make a lot of sense, which I mentioned at the end of that video, or at the end of this video, and at the end of that part of this video, I mentioned that Game Freak are basically, like, they need to, like, give the remake games, like, the remakes, you know, of the Pokemon games and the Let's Go series to really be handed to a different company. But it seems like the reason for that is mainly, like, the reason for that not happening is seemingly Game Freak's, like, inherent pride, right? They have a pride in themselves that they make the Pokemon games, and it's clear here that they do have the pride because this just came out from Masuda saying the Masuda reminds people that Game Freak makes the Pokemon games. And this article here goes through it on Kotaku say, quick, who's made the Pokemon mainline games? That's right, Game Freak. But some people think the answer is Nintendo. According to Junichi Masuda, lots of people do this. In a recent clip of Game Freak's official YouTube channel, Masuda recalled when Pokemon first came out, it was called a Nintendo game. While the game was released on Nintendo hardware, and while Nintendo is involved in publishing, Nintendo did not make the game. The relationship between Game Freak, Nintendo, and Creatures and the Pokemon company is rather complex, but as Nintendo World Report explains, Nintendo does the game publishing and distribution. Creatures handles the cards, though it does also make games, and Game Freak develops the games, and the Pokemon company seems to handle everything else and have its finger in all aspects. Granted, this is an oversimplification. Game Freak has released its games on non-Nintendo hardware, including Mega Drive, PC Engine, and Windows and the PS4. These are other games, not Pokemon ones. Plus, Nintendo, of course, does make spin-off games like Pokemon Stadium. Other studios have developed Pokemon spin-offs, including Jupiter Air, Spike-Chun. However, and this is a quote from Masuda, I've asked about 200 people who they thought made Pokemon, Masuda said, adding that almost 100% said Nintendo. Even now, there are those who think that I'm a Nintendo employee. This notion is so pervasive that when Masuda goes back to his hometown, he'll overhear people express disbelief to each other that he's actually Junichi Masuda, saying someone from Nintendo would never come to a place like this. So remember, Game Freak has made the mainline Pokemon games. And also, I'm sure someone from Nintendo would visit Masuda's hometown. That is very true. But I made a few posts here. Actually, I just, you know, oh, this is the wrong one. I think this is what I posted. I say I think Game Freak is doing this to themselves as a matter of pride. I mean, Masuda recently stated statements that Nintendo doesn't make the Pokemon, but fans think so. Clearly seems to show that they take pride in their games, and having Nintendo get the credit that Game Freak get, you know, more credit than Game Freak is probably frustrating. And that's pretty clear that he's making this statement now and putting this out there, right? Clearly, to Masuda, this is a matter of pride, right? And to the Game Freak company, it's a matter of pride. Hence why they probably don't want to give a different company the wheels to make the Pokemon remakes, because if they do that, they would just be even less in the limelight, and I think this is just a matter of pride to them. I think that's one of the things that's going on here. Either way, enjoy the rest of the video, guys. How's it going, ladies and gentlemen? My name is Ruffle Rowlett, and welcome back to a brand new video, guys. Today, we have a bit of a long video to do, guys. This is going to be a pretty chunky video. If you have noticed, it's going to be a pretty chunky one. So sit back, relax, grab yourself a beverage, and let's just read through this very long Reddit post that goes through, like, the true kind of, like, reason for the models and, like, you know, like what the deal is, like what's happening here, like a true analysis of the reused model situation. And I want to read through it and just give my opinions on it, like talk about it and share with you guys who, you know, don't want to read it on your own and just want to listen to somebody else like explain it to you or read it for you. If you want to read it yourself, it's a link down below, guys, and also it will be here on the screen when we're going through it, so you'll be able to see it for the most part. So yeah, let's get started with the whole thing here at the first start, which is posted by Mvit 15 hours ago, saying long post warning, an actual technical analysis of the whole reused model situation. Introduction. Hey guys, I don't usually post here, but I always lurk around. Recently, I've been noticing a lot of misconception and misinformation about the whole reused models debacle. Hopefully, I can clear some things up, which I really would appreciate, because there is one piece of information here which I never knew about, because I never actually dove that deep into it, but there's one piece of information that I never really knew about, which I really want to share, which is to do with the, you know, people who are making the 3D models, who makes what aspect of it, because I knew only the fact that Creatures Inc. was involved with making the models and the like just the models. Actually, I didn't know anything about the animation. I never mentioned the animation specifically because I didn't want to give misinformation. I just knew they worked on models, which is true, but there's another company involved beyond just Game Freak and Creatures. There's actually a third company which just adds more like stuff to this cake, which let's get started here. So the model collection. So The plan to maintain a growing collection of future-proofed models started around the time Black and White were in development. The Pokédex 3D, which was created by Creatures Inc., which we have seen on their website, showcased a fraction of this collection first in June the 6th, 2011. After Pokemon Black and White 2's release, the entire collection released in the form of a Pokédex 3D Pro, also developed by Creatures Inc. True, fair enough. Now, both Pokédex 3D and Pokédex 3D Pro refer to the team behind this collection as the Pokemon Art Team. The Pokemon X and Y formally introduced the collection to the mainstream series and expanded it with Generation 6. The collection has since been reused and expanded upon in the following mainline games. So this collection of 3D models has been used in Omega Ruby Alpha Sapphire, Pokemon Sun and Moon, Pokemon Ultra Sun and Moon, and Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu and Let's Go Eevee. Side note, Pikachu in Pokemon Sword and Shield. So in Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, they feature two unique models for the partner version of both Pikachu and Eevee. So if you guys don't know this, in Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, there's a different model for your starter Pokemon versus a normal, like, you know, Eevee or Pikachu in the wild. Your starter Pokemon has far more joints in it, there's far more, like, stuff to it, there's far more, like, just stuff going on with it, right? It's been far more developed and is far more detailed, so it can be more expressive and have a lot more, like, feelings and stuff, which is why when you pet it and stuff, it has all those reactions, and if you, like, you know, just have fun with it and whatnot, it's gonna, like, react a lot better, so yeah. But in Pokemon Sword and Shield, Pikachu uses the normal model variant during battle, but switches to partner Pikachu model when in Dynamaxed form. I've included an Imgur album for comparison. If we open this up, here you'll see what he's talking about. So here we have a normal variant Pikachu. So it's the same, essentially the same exact model, right? It's a normal variant Pikachu, but they're using the partner version of the Pikachu, the partner model. Seemingly, it's not confirmed. I'm not sure if this is confirming it, but he says here that seemingly that's being used here on the Dynamaxed Pikachu, which is a little bit odd, but fair enough. But here's what he says. So this is a standard Pikachu model dating all the way back to 2011's Pokédex 3D. So yeah, same model. It literally is. This is kind of undeniable. And the partner variant Pikachu, the Dynamaxed model has increased eye geometry and increased mouth geometry, suggesting that it uses Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee's partner Pikachu model. Fair enough. Alright, back to the actual point here. So, next, who made the models? Now, so far it might seem like Creatures Inc. has been solely responsible for the creation of these models. That's the thing though, I knew for a fact that most likely Game Freak was involved in some, like, sense of, like, you know, maybe animation and stuff, but it turns out I was wrong there. Like, this is something that I always confuse me, is like, who is involved with animation and stuff? Like, who provides that? Well, here's the thing, the studios that are providing those things are Creatures Inc. and Imagica Digital Scape Co. Limited, Bauhaus Entertainment Division, providing models and animations, and then Creatures Inc. providing models and animations, and as for Game Freak, they handle the model sheets. So that's kind of interesting, right? Like, it seems like Game Freak themselves aren't the ones that are involved within the model and animation creation. Now, that of course all hinges upon the realisticness of this person's, like, actual post here, and if it's true or not, which I assume it will be. If you actually open this up here, you can check out their website, the Bauhaus Entertainment Creative Studio Group, and I guess here we can kind of, like, scroll down and see some stuff they worked on. So they worked on Metal Gear Survive, which was a disaster, Xenoblade Chronicles 2, Smash and Magic, The Legend of Zelda Breath of the Wild, though, which is a fantastic game. They worked on that, and they worked on Sun and Moon, so that's confirmed right there, Pokemon, and Pokken Tournament they've also worked on for, I guess, models and animation. So yeah, we got a confirmation here, these guys have worked on these things, like Pokemon Duel as well, which is a mobile game. So they've clearly worked on these things before. They worked on Pokemon, which we now know for a fact, but are they working on Sword and Shield? That we do not know yet. That is not yet confirmed. Side note, credits. It may seem like Creatures Inc. or Imagica Digital Scape are not credited by the company name in the mainline series staff role. If you take a closer look, you'll find that Creatures Inc.'s Pokemon art team appears individually in the credits. As for Bauhaus Entertainment, their website lists Pokemon Sun and Moon along with other main series spin-off titles, going as far as back to 2009's Pokepark Wii, Pikachu's Adventure. Perhaps this is the earliest instance of the model library. Now, how are the models made? The process is detailed in CG World JP Volume 227, and this is actually a little bit of an article here which goes through how their process of, like, creation goes when they, you know, make these things. Now, unfortunately, this is all in Japanese, so I'm not going to use the Google Translated version that you see right here because that would be incorrect. I do not want to go through that, but it goes through the process of creation, which you got, you know, logically speaking, right? It's easy to just think, and I'm at fault with these things, like always, where, you know, you might think of it very simply, like, oh, just make a model, right? You know how the Pokemon looks like, just make it. Well, it isn't that simple. There's far more steps that go into, like, making a Pokemon than just that one singular step, right? There's far more instances that come through. So, that's that. Now, down here, I'll do my best to break it down. Now, first things first, number one is model sheets, right? So this, the model begins with the technical drawing showcasing the Pokemon's design in many angles. The goal is to provide the model artist with as many references as possible, streamlining the process as, you know, as a result. So here you have, for example, what we're talking about. You know, this is what we're talking about. We're talking about, you know, the sheets, or, you know, the design sheets here, which is the concept art, the things that, you know, sometimes, you know, often tend to leak to us. This is what they use, you know, for modeling. And this I'm aware of. This is something I already know, because this is what they need to have so they can actually work on the models, because otherwise they wouldn't know where to really, you know, they need, like, the Pokemon from many different perspectives to know how it's going to look like, so they have a reference to go off of instead of just going blindly in there, you know? So, next thing, modeling. The model artist then begins to shape the Pokemon in Maya, or I guess Blender, but I think Maya is the go-to one. It's like the industry standard, I would say, for games. They work in a quad mode, assuring the model can be subdivided, hence future-proofed. See, that's the thing. These models are created to be reusable, but I guess that's not really where the issue comes in. The issue comes a little bit later, as you'll see. So, rigging. The model artist then proceeds to add bones, ensuring that the Pokemon can animate according to its proportions. Alright, so rigging, you already guys know this, I would assume. You know, adding all the joints so it actually, you know, makes sense, so you can actually move the parts individually, that sort of stuff. Next point. So, there's a big step missing there, isn't it? Texturing. That's because texturing is hard to maintain in games, due to how graphics have evolved over the years, and the aesthetic choices that the art director demands. So, texturing on the Wii. Now, with the Wii, the main shader models were Lambert shaders, diffuse, or a Fong model, specular. You could get away with cell shading with a texture wrap or rim lights with the appropriate shader. All you would really need to then was a diffuse map, color plus some shade, and a specular map, how shiny some areas are. This jargon means that that in Pokemon Park Wii days, most of the Pokemon would need two textures. Certain Pokemon, like Magnemite, also used an environmental reflection texture, a shiny ball image, to fake metalness. Next, though, we have texturing of the 3DS, which is where it comes a little bit differently. So, the 3DS is a completely different graphical capabilities. It featured a low-level shading language that would allow you to make cool shading effects. The Pokemon from this era featured an albedo map, flat, unlit colors, a specular map defines shininess, a normal map provides extra shading detail, an emission map makes certain areas glow, and an environmental map makes fake metals and other caustic-looking, you know, things. Lunal's wings, for example, you know, just have that feel to them. And that's just the common ground between the Pokédex 3D, Pokédex 3D Pro, and the Pokemon Sun and Moon games. Pokemon X and Y featured the Monster Shader, made to emulate the Kensuke Mori unique art style. It was used in every mainline series titles since up to Ultra Sun and Ultra Moon. In order to achieve this style, even more textures are added to the mix. Tinted shadow maps to ensure that the shaded surface color is defined by the artist. Vanillite's blue hues, for example. Ambient occlusion maps ensures that the certain areas are always shadowed. Object space normal maps, modified normal maps that simplify the shading information, resulting in cleaner cell shading. And then, of course, we have also here cell shading lookup texture, allows the artist to tweak the cell shading parameters. We can open up these two and see what they look like. So here, for example, we can see how that looks like, and here with the cell shaded texture, there you go, boom. So you can see, right, the difference here, clearly. But yeah, let's continue. So, suddenly the texture per Pokemon cost has increased, hasn't it? Indeed it has. Now, texturing on the Switch. A new console generation has appeared, and it has brought a formal shading language specification to it. You know what this means by now. More aesthetic freedom and at the cost of more texture work. Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee feature a new aesthetic style. It's almost velvet looking at some points, and rubber looking at others. So that's very true. Like, I noticed that with Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee personally, the textures look very much like rubber. Like, kind of like, I don't know, like plasticky almost, right? Like, almost like plastic. And you can even download here. It says, I can recommend you to download a Pokemon Partner Pikachu's model and explore the texture yourself. I'll add some images about it soon. Writing is tiring, you know. We have our traditional albedo, which is _col, our tinted shadow map, _shadow, our object space normal maps, which are, I guess, or normal, which is _normal, but our specular maps are missing. What gives? Well, let's quickly see what the textures have been, thrown in the mix. Well, fur maps, _fur and _fur_a, Partner Pikachu and Partner Eevee both co-feature fur textures. They're similar to how specular maps define specularity, but in this case, it defines how fuzzy something looks and what color bounces off of it. The environmental maps, underscore environmental, or ENV, they're back. They're used a bit more sparingly this time, mostly on reflective surfaces such as Pikachu's eyes. And then you got ambient maps, underscore AMB, and ITA. These replace our specular maps. Each color channel defines how each part of the body is lit in the X, Y, and Z axes, which is, where it's positioned, providing even greater artist control, such as a faint rim light or a distinct shadow on Pikachu's neck. The underscore ITA map is very similar to the cel-shaded lookup texture, using all 3 color channels, individual tweaking of each axis. In my opinion, these new textures require higher amounts of artist input to do. It's one thing to slap some noises to make fur, but it's a completely different beast to make those ambient maps. Imagine the amount of handiwork behind redoing all the Pokemon's textures just for this one title's new aesthetic. Side note, so what about Pokemon Sword and Shield's texture? I'm glad you asked. It seems like Pokemon Sword and Shield is going back to the cel-shaded style, albeit with some added tinted rim light, tinted outlines, and finer shadow control. My personal theory, and this is just theory, so do keep in mind, it's no confirmation just yet, since I don't have access to the Sword and Shield files yet, is that the ambient map system from Let's Go is being brought back to control said rim light and cel shading, I guess, in Sword and Shield. The fur map is likely being replaced with a rim light contribution and tint map, similar to that of Persona 5's approach. And if we open that up here, take a little bit of a look at that stuff. So you got, like, I guess, development images right here. You can look through if you want to look into how they did that, because it's all Japanese, so it's kind of hard for me to, like, give any input on it, because I can't read it. But it's actually really worthwhile if you're into game development to read through these sort of, like, articles especially, and, like, just generally look into it. Now this has the caveat that every Pokemon in the collection needs to have their textures redone for this new title. And then Mori. On Omori's remade models comments, we have probably all read the infamous Famitsu interview in which Omori stated that every model has been redone for Pokemon Sword and Shield. It's actually really easy to debunk this. The models are future-proofed by being made in quads. As a matter of fact, here's how one would realistically update all the models for higher fidelity. It took me about 20 minutes to quadify Pikipek, and then 2 seconds to subdivide it, so something is going on with the statement for Omori. If we open that up right here, boom. So right here we have Pikipek's Sun and Moon model, left, and a correctly quantified version of the same model on the right side, right there. And then down here, if we were to make higher poly versions of the triangulated meshes, assuming we don't have the original mesh, which Creatures Inc. should have access to, we'd be ending up with the left result here. Now, by properly quadifying the mesh, again, unnecessary step considering Creatures Inc. has the access to the source mesh, we can properly subdivide and end up with a higher poly model, and that preserves the original rigging. The models do not have to be remade then. They just need to be re-subdivided, re-triangulated, and they should be good to go. My theory, when they said they needed to redo models, they were just referring to the models format, not the actual models, which that actually makes a lot of sense, because it turns out that they seem to have their own, like, formatting for their own game engine, which is what we're going to get to right here. So here's where the missing link comes in, the game engines. So this is something we've never talked about. I think people have mentioned the engine before, but nobody's actually really, like, explained it too well. So here's an actually decent explanation, which says that so far we've seen no evidence suggesting that the remade model statement is remotely true, but I've been withholding some information from you guys. A model is a representation of points and faces, and can be stored in an exchangeable form for editing purposes, yet they can also be stored in a more convenient read-only form for game engines. And guess what? Pokemon X and Y, Pokemon Sun and Moon, Pokemon Let's Go Pikachu, Let's Go Eevee, and Pokemon Sword and Shield all use different game engines. Interesting. Now, I'm not sure how he gets this information. I'm not sure how it's, like, figured out, but fair enough. Now, Pokemon X and Y's engine was shared with Pokemon Omega Ruby and Alpha Sapphire. Now, this is very true, as you will notice in the general style of the games and how they work. They're very, very similar, right? And the same thing has happened in the past. Like, for example, red, blue, and, yellow in those games use the same engine. But then, like, if you look at, like, Fire, Red, Leaf, Green, and Ruby and Sapphire, those use the same engine, but then you don't have the same engine being used for, like, the next generation, which was, Generation 4 with Sinnoh, with Diamond and Pearl, brand brand new engine, right? So they tend to make a new engine for every single generation as they iterate. So this is very, like, logical. Now, even sharing models and map compatibility between the two, the model format used for this engine is BCH, similar to a link between two worlds' models too. Now, Sun and Moon scrapped the previous engine, instead focusing on a new one with file streaming. For example, the maps aren't a single mesh anymore. Instead, certain props get loaded up individually as your player approaches them, or get replaced with imposters the further you go. As for models, Game Freak opted for their own format, the GF model format. Supposedly this engine move was due to the loading speed of Z animations and performance reasons. If we open this up right here, we will see that, I guess. Because Sun and Moon devs on gameplay changes, improvements, and setting Battle Royale, Pokemon Go, and more. And I guess over here we can go into that further, but right now I don't have the time, nor do you guys probably have the time to go through all these, like, instances one by one. So we can go through this at a different time. If you guys want to read through this, you can do that. But let's just go on here with what's next here. So Pokemon Let's Go Beach Let's Baby have a brand new engine. Well, is it brand new? Well, it's really a Frankenstein engine. It features code from the Nintendo SDK used for Breath of the Wild and Mario Kart 8. It features the file formats from Launch Pack, Splatoon 2's engine, and it features a Game Freak's own additions, along with Game Freak's new model format, GFBMDL, or Game Freak's binary model. It actually doesn't share much with the previous GF model incarnation, I believe it or not. Now, it could be then that they're using a brand new engine again for Sword and Shield. It's very likely that Game Freak has went ahead and removed their Nintendo SDK and Launch Pack dependencies. Now I've got to lower my music here. So, that they removed their dependencies, and along with it, it streamlined their GFBMDL format some more. Under this assumption, sure, the models could have been remade. Sure, very possible. TLDR, what remade models probably mean? Wow. We're finally here in the end. I've read up to, if you're up to this point, you probably know what difficulty in bringing all the Pokemon to a new game is. But for those of you that skipped, worry not, I'll summarize it really quick. Technology, time, and money. The new aesthetic style is allowed to flourish thanks to the new technology. Implies redoing textures all over again for the entire collection, meaning there's more time and money constraints added to the mix. A new model format implies reconverting all these models, skeletons, animations, and more, along with bug testing every single one of the models converters, loaders, new animations, and whatnot. This might sound simple on paper, but I assure you it's not. A lot of complications might pop up unknowingly. Here's an hilarious example of what happens when new animations and model format is being debugged from Sony's Marvel Spider-Man, which is right here, and you can see, actually, I watched this, actually, and you can see here, when they tried to do that, it created a little bit of a, I would say a disaster, you could say, a little bit of a disaster, you could say, a little bit of a disaster. So yeah, now what can we do about it? Well, does anyone remember the good old times when Pokemon titles popped up every 2 or 3 years, sorry? Have you guys noticed that Pokemon titles have been coming out annually, as annual releases now? That's where the issue lies. Another franchise that switched to an annual release schedule was Assassin's Creed. The quality of the releases since had gone down, but guess what? So did sales. Ubisoft took notice, and guess what? Assassin's Creed will not be returning yearly releases, and that is very true. I remember when this actually happened, and I was very happy to hear this. As somebody who was a fan, and who still is a fan, of Assassin's Creed, I was happy to hear that they were going to take a break from it and not just rush out games, because they were getting worse and worse, buggier and buggier. But Assassin's Creed Unity was a disaster, for example, and honestly, they were getting worse and worse, but then they released, now they've stopped the releases constantly, after Origin, they kind of slowed it down a little bit, and now with Odyssey as well, they've slowed down, and there's no new game this year, I'm pretty sure, as far as I can remember, which is good, they're taking more time on each release now, so that's very nice. So this is definitely a time management issue, not a development issue. New technology won't alleviate them. Traditional Pokemon games are no longer viable with this time scope, and it's either time we accept that, or time that management takes notice that the fans are not happy and sales are going down. But then again, those new games are looking good. No, maybe if they had to put development time in, they would have been even better. But yeah, that's added the Sun and Moon new engine article and some type of fixes. And actually, I was going to leave a comment here, but for some reason I couldn't read it. Something went wrong. I was going to say, this is an amazing piece of writing, which it is. It truly is an amazing piece of writing, and I appreciate it. But, it still opens up a lot of, issues here, if I'm going to be frankly honest. And I think all of it comes down to one simple thing. They're rushing out games too fast. They're not taking enough time to develop them. And like he said, it's a time constraint issue. It's a time issue more than anything else. And I've mentioned this before. I've talked about the concept of the fact, not a concept, but rather the issue being that they are just kind of pushing the games out faster and faster, instead of taking their time. But the problem is, when you're releasing games like they're doing with Pokemon, you gotta, you know, stick to a strict schedule, right? You have a schedule to follow for everything to release, you know? The game release needs to match up with the anime release, needs to match up with the movie releases, needs to match up with the TCG releases, needs to match up with the merchandise releases. There's a lot of steps there, okay? There's a lot of difficulty there, which is why I want to give Game Freak a little bit of a slack, but also I don't want to give them a little bit of slack for one other fact, which is they really should give some of these other projects to different studios. Like, they really should talk this over with, like, the Pokemon Company and Nintendo to maybe move, like, remaking projects over to other studios to alleviate pressure from them, because clearly, you know, they're working on Pokemon, but at the same time also working on several other projects, which is totally fine. They're, as a company, they're allowed to do that, right? I want to be as positive about this as possible. I'm gonna be honest, I'm a little bit tired of constantly nagging and attacking and, you know, just being negative, because I know I've been that over the last few, you know, last while here, but I still want to be constructively critical, right? And I think what they need to do, and I want to be as friendly as possible about this, I think what they need to do is just give their projects, you know, their other projects, their remakes, not like, I'm not talking about Town or anything like that. I'm talking about their other projects, like, you know, Diamond Pro remakes, Let's Go series. Those things need to be given to a different studio. A different studio can handle those, while Game Freak works on the main line core releases of brand new generations, like, for example, Sword and Shield, Sun and Moon, X and Y, Black and White, Diamond and Pearl. Those sort of games need to be focused on. Like, the brand new generations should be made by Game Freak and focused on by Game Freak, while a different studio, you know, should handle the remakes. I think we can all pretty much agree on that would be a better thing for all of us, because then, you know, there wouldn't be as much of a rush for them to get these games out, and we could literally at that point still get new releases every single year. Like, there's a different company that actually does this, or a different set of companies that actually do this, which is Activision. Has, you know, they have Treyarch, Sledgehammer, and Infinity Ward working on the Call of Duty games at every single, like, you know, there's a new Call of Duty game every single year, right? And not that they're, like, super good or whatever, like Black Ops 4 or whatever it was, pretty meh to me. World War II one was also pretty meh. The one that's upcoming this year looks, you know, the new Modern Warfare one that's coming this year looks pretty good. But the thing is, they have 3 different studios working on the games, which gives each studio a little bit more time to work on it. And they end up still having crunch. So imagine Game Freak having to work essentially on a new game every single year, and they have to have their studio, like, splitting apart, like, in this and that section, going all over the place to get things done. I really think it's time, you know, it's the time and place right now, finally, for Game Freak to just sit down, look over their situation, and move the remaking of games to a different studio. I know they like remaking the games. I know it benefits them, because, you know, there's money coming into the bank and it benefits their studio, right? But I really think, for the sake of their sanity and for the sake of the quality of their games, they should really do that. I think, so we can all just be happy with Pokemon, they should do that, because there's a lot of issues here. I clearly know that, you know, making a video game isn't easy, right? And, like, you know, having to seemingly transfer over these models and, like, re-rig them and all that stuff and debug them to work on a new engine, if they are using a new engine for this game, compared to, like, you know, what they did in Sun and Moon, because based on some information I've gotten from people that have played the game, the demo so far, there seems to be that 30 FPS gameplay still that we had during, you know, the 3DS era. That is still there, and there's still also a bunch of lag in the game, which that only happens if the game is being rushed, if they don't have enough time to fix all those issues, you know what I mean, to remove all that lag, which really shouldn't be once they're on a device like this, which should be able to handle it. And since majority of Pokemon is usually instanced, you know, like, usually Pokemon isn't, like, you know, for example, Breath of the Wild is an open world, right? So you can look into the horizon and see a bunch of stuff. Well, usually Pokemon, you don't have that. It's usually instanced, and in this game, it's kind of a mixture of that. You've got some areas we can look into the distance, right? See, like, super far away because it's the open world area, but then if you're in a city, you only see what they want you to see, right? So it should be able to handle itself way better, but it doesn't. It seemingly seems to have lag based on the first-hand experience from people I know who have played the demo. It seems to have a little bit of FPS lag and just, like, not like that level it should be at just yet, which I hope they will fix before release. But one final thing I want to say, guys, is I think this is a great article. I think it's not article, but I think it's a great post, rather. Sorry, I say article for some reason. I think it's a great post. I really think you should read it, because if this is true, what we see right here, right? If all these points are correct, this explains a lot, okay? This explains a lot as to what, you know, we're looking at here. We're looking at less a company being lazy but more a company being rushed. And I want to apologize. Personally, I want to apologize for calling Game Freak lazy, because I think what they're dealing with is too much shit on their plate. They're taking on too much work, and I think that's just more like an incompetence situation where they're just taking on way too much instead of just like alleviating some of that off them, or just taking a year where they do not release a game. Because right now they're pushing out a new game every year to keep that, you know, flow going, but doing that makes their games suffer. I really think they should calm down and not rush out games every single year. Release one, you know, take your time, make the next one, and then release the next one, right? Instead of rushing one out every year, because that's just going to cause issues for you. Or the best solution, give the remaking job to a different studio. Get 2 more studios to help you, like some other studios that you know would be willing to work with you, and they would be willing to make a game in that Game Freak standard that they have, you know what I mean, that Game Freak has for themselves, right? You know, get that, because I think that would help you a lot. So yeah, ladies and gentlemen, thank you for the video. If you did enjoy, drop a like down below. Check out the post here if you want. It's going to be linked down below. Have a great day, and bye-bye, ladies and gentlemen.